Hello everybody, my name is Ardalan Pilavizadeh. Today I want to talk about the role of roots in propagation phase in the increasing saffron bulbs. The majority of you, now you are the near flowering in the northern hemisphere, and I think that 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, flowering flowers will be appear. But here in the southern hemisphere in Australia, 2 months, we are in the middle of the propagation, the saffron bulbs. You know, with a simple language, I want to talk about uh, the role of the roots in the propagation saffron bulbs. All of you knows three main factors are important in the propagation phase. One of them, the leaves and the roots and the mother saffron bulbs. The main bulb that gave you flowers, and this is from this part, the new bulb, the daughter bulb will be appear, and this is a very important. With this condition, the saffron bulb in some country is pretty forbidden, prohibited, and some country the saffron bulb is a very expensive, and also exporting saffron bulb from Iran is 100%. It's pretty banned, and we cannot buy the saffron bulb from this country. Therefore, very important, only once we buy the saffron bulbs, and this is your art that we can propagate saffron bulbs. And when we decrease the cost of the saffron bulbs, without doubt we guarantee the success in the saffron bulb for the second year, for the third year. Some parts is very important. For example, in the previous videos, pretty different. Why we can which factors are important. Now I want to focus on the roots. In this propagation saffron bulb, this is a strong roots, and this is weak roots. Okay, the root exactly should be here, and the density of roots is high, and and the mother bulb also is still alive. Here in Australia, we are exactly in the middle of the propagation, and the mother bulbs is clear. But in the weak propagation, this converted in the middle of the propagation, exactly the piece of the black piece and the dyed piece, and you can see in the mother. But in this stage, 2 months after propagation, still mother bulbs is alive. With the water program, with the water plan, with the best fertilizer, with the other factors, we could still keep the mother bulbs alive, because very important. If we have the three source, the leaves, roots, and the mother bulbs, if we try always be the healthy, that is very clear. We will have a heavy daughter saffron bulb, heavy new bulb, not the small bulbs. But in the roots, that is a strong, because at least in the 20 centimeters, 3 centimeters should grow the roots, and completely density, because these bulbs are able, even these roots absorb the nutrition, the fertilizer. But if you have the great fertilizer, the best fertilizer, but the roots be weak, okay, also immediately the mother bulb started to the uh, diminishing, and started to the dying. Therefore, very important. Which factors are important in the strength of the roots? Unfortunately, some of you think the only fertilizer and the chemicals is important. For example, humic acid, search in the internet. Which chemicals are important? Humic acid, amino acid. You started to the giving full chemicals, humic acid, amino acid, protein, nitrogen, all a kind of the variety of the fertilizer. And not only they are not efficient, but they are the killer of the mother bulbs and the noodles, and started, because has a very important. I promise you, if you respect some very simple regulation without any fertilizer, the result will be much better till you want to give the full of the fertilizer. Okay, some simple. One of them is providing the best physical environment. You know, if you provide from the beginning of the propagation, if you provide the best substrate, you should give them to the laboratory test. If you provide with a suitable EC, with a suitable pH, if you provide the best substrate, okay, even if you couldn't provide the fertilizer, the results will be good. Without any fertilizer, without any spraying. Of course, the giving the fertilizer, giving the is important, also plays important role. But this is a part of our program in the increasing the saffron bulb. They play only 10%, 15%. A variety of the reason help us. We will have the heavy saffron bulbs during propagation. Therefore, you should provide, automatically growing saffron indoors itself is a challenge. Why it's a challenge? Because the flowering happens in the one environment and the propagation in another environment. This is also challenging, and because this is a new method. Therefore, we should change a variety of the reason. For example, the saffron for the flowering, there is not any, there is a need distance between the two bulbs. But in the propagation phase, we are not able to put close together, okay? Therefore, this is your art that, for example, the 100 meters, okay? In the 100 meters, if we can grow and the flowering for the 3-ton saffron bulb with a 3 kilogram dry saffron, and for the propagation, if you can, okay, with the same room and the same 3,000 saffron bulbs propagate, this is your art with some regulation, okay, provide their roots not close together. With the vertical farming, you will be able to have a successful, and it doesn't need you transport them to the soil. For example, 1 hectare, that doesn't make sense. Okay, for example, you have the only for 100 meters, you receive the flowers for the 3 ton, and if you want to transplant to the 1 hectare, 5,000 meters, same three saffron bulb, you should provide happen everything in the one room, one cultivation depth. Therefore, it is your art. You can, in the same room, same dimension, you can propagate the saffron bulb. You should provide the most important parts in the increasing the yield of the roots, the capacity of the roots, the density of the roots with the space. Okay, the saffron bulb for the roots needs to the space. Okay, needs to the space, and for example, if you close together, I promise you, this also start with the demolition. Therefore, we need to provide the first important thing, provide a physical environment. Okay, therefore need to the space. Then with the substrate that we use, substrate is a very important, because when we give the water with the best drainage, immediately the amount of the water we give, this is 50% of the water should absorb and the 50% should evaporate with the best ventilation. But if the substrate doesn't have good structure, doesn't have good improvement, the water that you use is not able to absorb and stay under your shelves, and the roots start to the rotted and completely dying, and will be died easily in the 1 or 2 days. Started to the black spot roots and also mother bulb. Therefore, the substrate that you use should keep the water for at least 2 or 3 days, and the structure should be, evaporation should happen easily from the substrate. Okay, therefore, in the substrate that you use, we should have the 100% evaporation from the surface. Therefore, this is, for this you need to the machine or the air handling unit, and you will have the 100% ventilation. Because during flowering, we do not need to do any ventilation, doesn't play important role, but in the propagation, we need 100 ventilation because during flowering, we don't give any water to the substrate. But in the propagation phase, we start to the watering, to the fertilizer. If you don't have any ventilation system, water stays on the surface and all the mother bulb and the roots, and therefore we will have the yellow leaves on your rooms, and whole the process of the propagation will be 1 month. Propagation phase, we should have the 4 months with the green leaves, with the strong roots. Therefore, we are able to have a heavy daughter saffron bulbs. Therefore, with I told you, fertilizer is not solution. Only with the space. With the space, with the same room. Another reason is the ventilation. If you have the provide, when I talk about the ventilation, I mean the room and also inside the substrate. You should not, after that using we need to natural elements. We should provide the substrate inside the substrate provide. Cultivation depths, the suitable cultivation depths, also another things. Cultivation, for example, 5 centimeters or the 10 centimeters is not suitable cultivation depths because with the 10 centimeters cultivation depths and the roots are not able to grow and stay in the 10 centimeters or the 5 centimeters, and therefore the growth of the roots will be stopped. Will be stopped after 1 month or 2 months. Therefore, the results is not good. Another thing is that the gap between the flowering and the propagation phase. We shouldn't have even the 1 day gap, even 1 day gap. Everything should be ready, okay? Because in the new method, even we don't have any gap. For example, some of you, after flowering, after the finishing flowering, started to give your substrate to the laboratory test. This from, for example, 4 months before flowering should be started. For example, everything should be covered. The workers, when the flowering they finish, and when the flowering finish, you should immediately with the layer, all the shelves should be removable so that in the maximum 48 hours should be finished all. Some of you, when I talk about the flowering, you waited near the 1 month. Efficient period of the flowering is 2 weeks. When you harvested the peak of the saffron, you should have started to the propagation. But some of you, even they wait for the 1 flower, for example, for the 10 flower, for the 50 flower. When you pass the peak of the flowering, and there is no matter, for example, some of the bulbs started to the, but doesn't make sense. When you wait from the other saffron bulbs, the 80% of your saffron bulbs that already you received the flower start to the decreasing the weight, okay? Because the saffron bulbs, these mother bulbs, in the determined period has a strong. But if you don't add the substrate to the bulbs when they are strong, these immediately start to the blacking, to the black, and these bulbs is not able give you the heavy daughter bulb. Therefore, today I want to tell you, don't confuse with yourself. Don't think that, okay, if I give with the humic acid, with the chemicals, with the best nitrogen, with the best amino acid, okay, all will be finished. Okay, some lateral activity that is very simple but is very important, like the cultivation and the most important thing in the water. How much water? You know, climate by climate is different. You should see which climate, which city you live, which substrate you use. Okay, the substrate by substrate is different. For example, we cannot give for example, this is the water, okay, 2 liter per square meters. Okay, this is for example, with another substrate, it means 4 liter per meter. But another thing, in your substrate, you should divide with the 1 meters, 1 square meters. Okay, 1 square meter. But you should before for the water plant, you should provide a water tank. Okay, water tank that has a degree. You should know how much water I giving to the substrate. Okay, how can they calculate with the, for example, the water? You should provide, for example, 5,000 liter capacity with the water tank. And for example, I started to the, for example, I started the whole of the shelves, 5,000 liter tank, and I started giving water to the shelves. And you started spraying, okay? And after that, see how many square meters you have under cultivation. For example, my room is 5 meters by 20 meters, is, for example, 100 meters. With a vertical system, with a shelving system, I will have 500 square meters. Therefore, I have 500 square meters under cultivation, and you give 5,000 liter water. Okay, 5,000 liter water. It means you give per meters, for example, 10 liters. Okay, you give 10 liters. This is very high. Okay, for 500 square meters for the giving the water. Some of you don't know how much. Okay, only a spray to the system. You should, everything should be calculated. You should know how much water I gave to the substrate for the propagation phase. Okay, for this, okay, you can provide, for example, tank. You know, for example, I have the water tank, uh, 500 liters capacity. When I all of them, when I started to giving water from the 500 meters to the 500 square meter, it means per square meters I give 1 liter per square meter. That is a very normal. Okay, for example, 1 liter per square meter is a normal. But 10 liters, 5,000 liter capacity, for example, 10 liter per square meter means you kill the saffron bulbs. Okay, therefore, my mean is you should know how much water I am giving to the substrate. This is should be know. Okay, for example, the normal things 1 liter per square meter, and then depending on your climate, how many I should repeat per day. For example, some climate, some substrate you use needs to the only 1 liter per day is enough. How many days I should repeat? This means need to the monitoring. You should see some substrate and some water, and you can see the roots is very strong and absorption is the very high. Absorption is very high. Sometimes need to 3 times or 4 times. 4 liter per square meters per day even is perfect. Okay, but you see the roots is a weak, the substrate is a weak. The maximum, the amount of the water you can, for example, per day 1 liter per square meters. And weekly you should give, not every day during propagation phase. Everything you should see what is the substrate, what is the climate, what is the laboratory test of your substrate. Okay, but I hope you shouldn't do it during this time. You should already 3 months ago, 2 months ago, you should planning for this program. Therefore, the water plays important role. Density plays important role. Cultivation depth plays important role. The gap between the finishing flowering and the starting the propagation plays important role. Also, the fertilizer are helpful. But if you don't know anything about the fertilizer, I recommend don't give any fertilizer, because the giving the fertilizer needs to be calculated. You should calculate according to the soil test. You should calculate. But if you don't give any fertilizer, I promise you the result will be much better than only give the, for example, calcium sulfate, potassium sulfate, nitrogen, the full of the amino acid. Only you kill the saffron bulbs. And also after that, the temperature also plays very important role during propagation. The temperature inside the room, temperature inside the substrate, you should measure a different part of your room. One of them room temperature, one of them substrate temperature. Also the amount of the water that you give, also the light also plays important role, because during flowering it doesn't need light, the amount of the special light, because some of you I see during flowering you started to the full of the gross light, red, blue, you only decrease the amount of the flowering. It doesn't need during flowering any light, but after the flowering you need to the maximum light, because during flowering we don't have any green part, but after during propagation we have different green parts. And in fact the lights very helpful, the lights, the water, all of them help you have a successful propagation. Thank you.